Oh, good afternoon and welcome to today's CMBB research seminar. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Tod Fairbanks. Some of you may already know him because he teaches in the biotech program at Palm Beach State, up I believe it's the northern campus. However, I asked him to come here and talk to you because of his experience in the pharmaceutical industry. It's not surprising that the majority of biology majors are pre-med majors. It's been that way for as long as I've been teaching. And some may find that as they learn more about the profession, maybe it no longer draws their interest, or they really begin to understand the true competitiveness of getting into these type of professional programs. And so what I'm asked Dr. Fairbanks to do is to give you an overview of other career opportunities in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries other than pure research, in case for whatever your reason is, you begin moving away from being a pre-med or the DO programs or something along those lines. So with that brief little introduction, I think we'll get right to the heart of it. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Fairbanks.
Okay, so as you see here, and Dr. Binninger said, some of you are in a situation where things either have not worked out quite the way you thought they were going to be. In fact, there's a reason for that as we go along here. We're going to talk about some of the problems and career planning outside of academia. But this is what I'm getting at. Your plans were, as Susie here on the bike was going to end up at the checkered flag as a doctor or a dentist or a veterinarian or something along that line. And somewhere along the line, the universe here had some other plans for you, and you had a little problem along the way, little things you couldn't handle, and things that are not quite going the way you thought. And so now you were getting a biology degree, and some of you are not. Obviously, get some other kind of degree, but that's fine. And so we want to give you some idea of what to do with a degree, because you spent a lot of time and energy going to class and getting all those A's that you're supposed to have for going to med school, and some of you didn't quite get all those A's, and maybe that's the problem, and others didn't do so well on the MCAT exam, and some of you will take it again and maybe you'll do better. But some of you are like, this is it, I'm going to go on and try to do something else. So I'm going to give you some ideas of some other things you can do with your degree. So in case you're majored, and I have an example here, in case you majored in biotech, your plans were to have your tracings to come out like this, and in fact they came out this way. So you get the idea, the same kind of Susie on the bike. So this is not new. This has been this way forever. Most undergraduate, even graduate programs in all colleges have been pretty much trying to encourage their students to go on and be researchers or whatever they plan, but certainly not other options. And so in the old days, it used to be, you're going to go on and get a PhD or whatever, or you're going to go on and get an MD, and you'll be happy in your career. But what happens is that about 10% of the graduate students, for instance, actually only end up in academic positions. So that means 90% are going somewhere else or doing something else. And many of you, again, really don't care about the graduate student aspect because you were going to go to medical school. And maybe that's true and maybe that's not. So here's some of the problem. You have to choose you want to choose a medical career, and you all chose to be physicians, and that's not quite going to be the case. And so let's see if there's other things you can do. If you still want to be in the medical career, you can actually, go off and do something totally different, but we kind of invested some time in medical, so maybe that's what you want to do. So, as I said, medical school is far from a sure thing. This is an interesting little statistic. Is that 91.5% of all applicants with MCAT scores between 39 and 45 were accepted to medical school. So that leaves about 9–10% of the students were not accepted, even though they had the highest grades in on the MCAT exam. And on the other end of the scale, only a couple percent that scored between 5 and 14 were accepted. So accepted to medical school is actually a multifactorial thing, not just the MCAT exams, but that does play a big role. So what has happened? Why is that? Why do people not get into medical school? And this graph here is showing you a couple of different things, but I want you to notice the big green arrow shows you the growth in the physician positions in the United States, all right? And you'll notice that those positions really haven't changed a lot over whatever it is there, like 30 years, all right, 30, 40 years. It's pretty flat, pretty small. But what has changed is the huge growth in administrators and other people in the healthcare field. And so there's some opportunity, obviously huge opportunity in that way. This is also an issue for physicians. The fact that they have so many administrators they have to deal with is another whole problem. But this is an interesting little graph that shows you that there really aren't a lot of positions for you to go into. Then, if that weren't enough, the world, as I always say, is a flat world. All right, and by that, Thomas Friedman actually wrote a book about this. The world is flat. And he basically made the case that, it's not just you in the United States that's trying to get into the U.S. medical school. It's students from all over the world. And some of these colleges are incredibly good colleges, Oxford, Cambridge, the University College of London, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, University of Tokyo, University of Melbourne. All of these schools have tremendous number of students, and guess what? They're also trying to get into medical school in the United States. I mean, some of them are trying to go where they came from also, but they're trying to get into medical schools here. All right. I think you might actually remember that you may have heard that, for instance, so many Chinese students that had applied to Harvard that they actually had to start limiting the number of Chinese students. That caused the lawsuit, but they had to try to limit the number of Chinese students applying to Harvard Medical School because they all were qualified and they were all getting, they all should be accepted. There wouldn't be any places for anybody, right? So they tried to control that. I don't know what the outcome of the lawsuit was, but I'm sure there's still a lot of Chinese students at Harvard. And then there's this, the graduation, the process of changing one's status from student to unemployed. And so you didn't get into medical school. What the heck are you going to do with a biology degree? I mean, some of you think I can work as a forest ranger or so on, something like that. It's a little different than going to medical school. And by the way, you'll be living in a trailer and you will be on food stamps. I mean, they don't pay anything to go to work in the forestry service. You might be having fun communing with nature, but you're not going to have a lot of money to live on. So unemployment is a real problem. And then there's my favorite here. So this biology degree may actually lead to something called underemployment. All right. And so she got a BS in biology at Penn State or someplace, and now she's a bartender. So is that really underemployment? I make the case that she's actually working in biotech fermentation, so it's not quite as far away as you think from being underemployed. But that there are a number of people out there, a number of students who will have to take jobs that are not, I don't want to say beneath them, but it's not up to their education if you spend all that time in biology. So we're going to come up with some solutions. We had all these problems and what to do, but now let's come up with a solution. Part of the solution pot. So here's part of the solution. the whole life science arena, not just physicians, but everything having to do with healthcare and medical things and life science in general is growing quite well. I mean, it's not, these are millions of jobs, and you can see it's back to 2018 and so on, but that was not when we had the economic downturn. That was back in 2008 and 9, and you can see it just took a little dip there, but the numbers are just staggering. I mean, it continues to grow at a very nice rate. So it's not that you need to leave the field that you get your major in, but that maybe you need to find another position in the area. And then again, it may be that you become some sort of, although it's labeled as administrator, there are a number of jobs in that aspect of healthcare that are not physicians. And so that area has been growing also. For example, a physician assistant would be an example of something that would probably fall under the administrator in this graph, because they're not physicians, and yet they are in heavy duty demand for having a good biology background and actually being a pre-med student, because you're pretty much taking all the same courses in order to get to be a physician assistant. So this is something to think about. Excuse me. Now, in fact, here is a chart that I didn't make myself, but somebody made, and obviously we've got all the non-MD. I think we maybe actually have MDs in here somewhere, but here's all the number of other types. There's physicians, right? We do have them. There are other MD, non-MD types of degrees: psychologists, veterinarians, we said, speech pathologists, optometrists, dietitians, physical therapists, pharmacists, and so on. I've had a number of students actually go to pharmacy school, although it's dropped off a little bit now because of the, now they have a few extra, they have more than they need in some cases. But so there's a lot of other kinds of positions that you should think about. But my background is more in the industrial side, the pharmaceutical biotech side. And so I'm going to spend time on that. You can try to go off and be a dietitian or something like that. That's fine. Or med tech lab person, work in a hospital. Because your backgrounds all have that, that kind of fulfill the requirements for going to become a registered dietitian, a medical technologist. You have to take more school and stuff, but that's the case. Now, in biotech, you could end up in something where you're doing research and so on, but this is actually representing more of a manufacturing process. And you can see there's some engineering and science involved here. And so we're going to talk about some of these kinds of jobs. So it's not to say that pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies don't have research. They really do have research. Here we have a typical research, and I mean typical research lab in one of the pharmaceutical companies, and you see there's no shortage of equipment and people and so on, facilities to do the research, because research is the source of their products and so on. And so they do lots of research, and they hire lots of research people, and they hire lots of people who are not PhDs and not MDs. They hire technicians and technologists and so on. And a lot of you would be, even with a bachelor's degree, qualified to work in some of these labs because of your background. But this is what people think of, and the first thing they think of is, oh, I can go and I want to work in research. But that's fine, but there are a lot of other positions too. So the first section, first area is a little bit difficult to get into because it's clinical. And so it sort of means that you might need some sort of clinical experience. It turns out, however, that the clinical part is run by physicians and people who have clinical degrees, but that doesn't mean the people working in those areas are all clinical people. So because they're handling, as you can see, they're handling specimens, they're handling clinical trials, they're handling data and so on. So there's a lot of aspects of of clinical research that involve people who have a science background, but not necessarily a clinical background. So that's something to think about. And there's a group called regulatory affairs, and regulatory affairs is kind of a strange group. They would be well served to be obviously somebody with a science and medical, not necessarily medical, but at least a science background. Regulatory affairs people work between the company and the regulatory agencies like the FDA and so on. So a lot of, refer a lot to these clinical trials that have been going on with COVID-19. So they did these randomized clinical trials, 30,000 people, and that data has to be submitted to the FDA. It was submitted to the FDA, and all that coordination and all that activity was done by people who are involved in regulatory affairs. They have to negotiate. They have to follow up, make sure everything is going smoothly between the company and the agency and so on. Now, the training for this is in the past has been pretty much on the job, but now you can actually go, and some of this is online. I believe the University of Florida is one of them, but several of them have online, maybe 1 year type of coursework where you can become a regulatory affairs person and actually be hired by companies to do this kind of stuff. There's an upside to this too. It turns out that after a while, when you may say you retire, you can actually become a consultant in regulatory affairs, because the biotech companies, the little companies that are just starting up and stuff, they can't afford to have somebody for every position in their company. So they'll actually hire consultants, and one of the consultants they normally hire are regulatory affairs. And these guys make thousands and thousands of, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in consulting after they've left the pharmaceutical industry, and they consult for the biotech. So that's something later. That's obviously later in your career. So here's regulatory affairs. Again, they're working with the health authorities, but also working within the company, research and development, production, commercial, and all that kind of stuff. And so, but this is the main conduit of information between the company and the health authorities. The next is something called business and licensing, business development licensing. And these guys are involved in deals. So on the business development side, pure business development, which is not sales, all right? It's actually business development. It's making deals between companies to do things about business, all right? They're usually MBA students. So, again, unless you have an MBA or you concentrated in business or something, you're probably not going to make it into the business development side. However, on the licensing side, you're still probably not going to make it into the big stuff, the compounds and products, which the deals can be hundreds of millions, billions of dollars involved in that. And that's usually involving PhDs and MDs and so on. However, even at a bachelor's degree, although I don't show it here, but a bachelor's degree in biology, you could work in some companies in what's called science and technology. And you're helping the company license devices and tests and so on from universities and other companies, and the deals are more like $100,000 instead of millions of dollars. And so they trust a lower, we'll say, a lower level of expertise and so on. You're not alone. There'll be lawyers involved. There'll be different people, and obviously supported by other research people and so on. But this is an area where somebody with a bachelor's degree could actually enter the company and actually wouldn't work on their own. Would work with some other people. It just depends on the company. We'll come back. The next is law, patents, intellectual property. So some of you may have thought about, maybe I want to go to law school. I want to be a patent attorney. Well, a patent attorney, again, just what it says, you're going to go to law school after you've graduated, and that's another, I don't know, year or two in order to do that. And then you got to pass the bar exam and so on. It turns out that there's another option, and it's called a patent agent. Now, the patent agent does the same thing as a patent attorney. They just don't go to law school, and they learn all about the aspects of doing patents. The only thing they can't do is go to court and be an attorney in a patent litigation. All right. So if you wanted to do something like this and be in the area of patents and understanding how patents are done, you could actually look into this. There are there are, I would do a search online, Google something like that to see if you can find some programs that wouldn't be. It's certainly not a whole extensive law degree in it, and again, they are hired all over the place. There are people, for instance, in Palm Beach, then the biotech firms that came in, the law firms followed, but most of the lawyers that they hired into these firms were patent agents, not patent attorneys, because they didn't expect to have to go to court. If they did, then they would actually have a lawyer to be overseeing something like that. So a patent agent is another way to go. And then there's the commercial side, and so some people feel that's the evil side. It's the non-scientific. It's promotion and all that kind of stuff. There's a problem here, that there's sort of a disconnect. The pharmaceutical industry is actually, and I mean the big companies, I don't mean some of these fly-by-night operations. These are big time, heavy duty education organizations, and the people they hire into marketing and sales, even sales, are people with degrees of knowledge having to do, especially with biology and medicine and so on. So you could go into the commercial side with your biological background and become quite successful, because what the company is going to do is they're going to teach you how to sell, if that's what you're doing, or they're going to work with you in the marketing aspect and the promotional aspect. But you have the science, so you understand what's going on, what's being taught. Now, the marketing side of this comes in a couple of ways. One is called strategic marketing. And these people, they tend not to be associated with sales at all. They are people who are following the development of a product in the pharmaceutical industry. Products in pharmaceutical actually take about 10 years in development. So you need people who are going to be in there at various stages to do different things. And there is a strategic marketing person responsible for every compound that's being developed, from the time that it becomes chosen as something you're going to start doing preclinical trials on, all the way up to the point where they become products, where they're going to be marketed. And it turns out when they become products, then tactical marketing takes over, and that's usually people who are ex-salespeople or even people from the travel industry. They're going to be people who are actually, travel is just a higher level of sales, right? It's not your used car type sales. So it turns out a lot of salespeople, if you think about it, in pharmaceutical, come from areas where they can communicate with the physician or with the medical community. And travel obviously is something that everyone likes to talk about. Used cars is not something people want to talk about. So pharmaceutical sales rep tend not to be from that industry. They're more likely to be from the travel industry or hospitality or something along that line. And then if they go on, they may become tactical marketing, which supports domestic sales through promotional material educational programs. It's a totally different thing. And again, having these kinds of backgrounds is actually helpful. Now, you'll notice there's a funny one in here called PSM. It's called the Professional Science Masters. I'm going to talk about that later, because that's part of what FAU has as a major. after your bachelor's. Another area in sort of related to sales is called technical and medical marketing. They tend to be people who have a background like Nora here. She actually has a PhD. When I knew her, she was an RN and an MBA, so she got her PhD later. But she's what it's called a science liaison. And it turns out today the government has clamped down on sales reps, pharmaceutical rep, and told them, you can't be talking to physicians about products. You can buy them a pizza, for lunch or something, and give them a pen, but you can't be talking to them about clinical data. If you want to talk to somebody about clinical data, you have to talk to one of these science liaisons. And so a person like Nora here will go and talk to the physician along with the sales rep or by themselves, and they will set up little investigator trials. They'll do all kinds of different things and talking about the scientific data, which the reps can no longer do. That's something you could do. You could be in sales. So here are pictures. These are, if you go to Google and you put in pharmaceutical rep, in images, you end up getting pictures. And so this guy is a pharmaceutical rep and she's a pharmaceutical rep. At least that's what it's labeled as. Now you'll notice that they are likely to have science degrees. It doesn't say that, but I'm likely that they did. But they also need to be charming, good looking, and social and all that kind of stuff. So if you have some of these characteristics, you might actually qualify as a sales rep. You still need your science, but you might be charming, right? That might help you get that job. Then there's a group called competitive intelligence, these are spies basically, right? So here we have a scientific meeting and we have posters of all different kinds of science posters, and you're standing there next to your poster and you got all these people coming up and some of these people get a lot more other than others coming up and asking about your research and stuff. And the question is, why are they asking about my research? Why? They don't appear to be at some university or anything. What's going on? Well, it turns out they're probably from a company or an agency of the company, and they're asking about your poster because they're trying to get you to spill information about what your research is all about. Sometimes it's in the sponsorship of some other company, so they're actually trying to find out secrets that you're not supposed to be telling them. But sometimes they're charming too, and they charm those information right out of you. So there's that. There are actually people in pharmaceutical companies that have that. They don't do this. They don't dumpster dive, right? They don't go in the dumpster and try to find secret information. They hire people to do that, but they don't do it themselves, right? So you're basically a coordinator for that kind of stuff. Not much of that. Then there's a big area called tech ops. And this is basically the manufacturing side. And the people in charge tend to be highly educated chemists and engineers. They may have a master's and PhDs and engineering degrees and so on. But there's still lots of people involved in the manufacturing process who have lesser degrees. And again, you may fall into this category because this is actually kind of an interesting place. You basically are following directions on how to manufacture something, labeling and packaging and all that kind of stuff. However, at the same time you're doing that, you may be thinking of ways to improve the process. And this is an amazing thing. You find a way to save the company, let's say a couple $1 million on the manufacturing of a product over time, you're going to get a share of that $2 million, right? They're going to give you a bonus because you came up with a more efficient way of doing it. So this is actually an area where people get very creative, and not to make something totally different and screw it up. You can't do that. But if you can come up with a better way to do something, a better mousetrap, so to speak, that doesn't require you to go back and do a new clinical trial, you could actually become you could have a lot of money in your pocket, right? And be fun. Here's another example of tech ops, and they learned some pretty heavy duty stuff. This one's Bristol Myers Squibb, like one of the companies I used to work for, is the biological manufacturing process in Devon, Massachusetts. And what this guy is standing next to is a 20,000 liter bioreactor. Now, some of you have been in the biotech area, maybe taken a course or two or something. And the bioreactors that you have in the lab are 1 liter, right? 1 liter on the lab bench, 20,000 liters, 120 trillion cells. And he's on a ladder because he's not even near the top of he's getting towards the top, but the top of the tank, which is in background here, is actually on the 2nd floor. So if he wants to open something on the 2nd floor, he's got to go upstairs. That's how big these things are, right? These guys are posing. It's probably some food coloring or something there. You know how that is. Now, is this a pretty lucrative area? Sure. Look at this. This is in 2000, 2000 or something like that. Bristol Myers opened this facility up in Massachusetts, and they hired roughly 300 people who did not exist in that area. All right, they had to hire them from all over the place, and they were primarily biology majors. Anybody that would have an interest in working in this kind of facility. They were so successful that 3 years later they added another 250 million investment to this facility and expanded it, and hired another 350 people. Again, with biology background, not all, lots of technicians to do this kind of stuff. Okay. Now, there is another area that I don't find it the most exciting area, but it is a way that some people get into companies, and it's called quality control and quality assurance. And you're looking at something over and over again to make sure the quality is after manufacturing has been maintained and so on. And I dare say a lot of people, maybe in your situation, use this to get into a company, and then after 6 months decide, I've had enough of looking at the same thing for a long time. I want another job. And the good news is that if you're in the company, you're going to see the job openings inside the company before anyone on the outside. So every time you see a job posted on the outside of the company, it means that no one on the inside of the company was either qualified or wanted that particular job. Okay. So again, you get first dibs. And the key here is that you got into the company. The old days, and you've maybe seen movies like this, the old days, you want to get into a company, you go to the mail room. You started in the mail room. Well, we don't even have mail rooms anymore. Everything's electronic, but today it's more of the quality control area. That's sort of the starting point for some people. So here again, all the careers involved in companies, life science companies, and it's all over the place. We mentioned a number of these. Project management is another one where having a biology background or a background in science would be good. You're helping coordinate the activities of numbers of people during the product development. Remember, I told you the product development might take 10 years to finish, and so they need people to manage that process over the years. Another area that people don't think about, and it's called contract research organization, or CROs, and they can be research or they can be clinical research. It turns out that a lot of pharmaceutical companies and even biotech companies, as I said before, can't afford to have somebody to do every little job in the company, so they outsource it. They outsource to other companies that handle this stuff. And so these CRO type organizations hire scientists. They hire people with different backgrounds, and they're sort of like rent-a-techs or rent-a-people to the companies. I've seen situations where the CRO will actually send the person to the company to work there for 6 months or something. But there's also the research aspect where they do research in their own facility. And so here's some examples here. This is the Drug Study Institute in Jupiter, and here's Palm Beach CRO, and Criterium, Florida, and Boca. These are places that are doing. There's more than this, but I just fit it on the slide here. These are places that are doing research, clinical research, all kinds of different research, preclinical research too sometimes, for the big pharmaceutical companies, which by the way are not in Florida, right? So this is one way to stay in Florida working for or doing the work of big pharmaceutical companies, all right, by not even leaving even Palm Beach, right, Palm Beach County, because you have these facilities, all right? So that's something to think about when you're looking for a position. You don't have to go the actual big company. Here's another area people might not even think about. This is an ad for this company called Lockwood, and all these people are in the what's called the support services area. This happens to be what's called a med ed group, I believe. I don't think it's advertised, med ed. And you may have seen some investigators, professors at the university, or in a company or someplace, and it says they have 500 publications, but a lot of them have been clinical research and things like that. And it's like, that's sounding impossible. How can a doctor write 500 papers like that? He didn't. The company hires people like these guys to write up all the data. The physician was in charge of collecting the data and making sure everything was done appropriately. But he hasn't got time to write it all up. So they hire people like this, who, by the way, all are some sort of biology, science background person. You can't just be an English major to write up and understand data, right? The biological data. So these guys all have to have some sort of science background, and they don't have to have PhDs to do it. So again, it's something to think about if you actually can write well, and you actually have been a fairly good scientist. And today, the way things are working, you don't have to go wherever this is. This is probably in New York City, but you don't have to go there today. You can sit in your home and do this kind of research now. You don't have to go anywhere. There's so much is done online. So you can be employed all over the United States. You don't have to. You can go and sit in Alaska if you want to do that instead. And then some of you, probably not too many, but some people think, well, I want to go to Wall Street. I want to be a Wall Street analyst. Well, probably not going to happen. This is not an easy thing to get into. Not only is it, we'll say, the old boys network, right, which makes it tough. It also is a who do you know network, and so again, if it's in your family, you might be able to get into some sort of position at Wall Street. A lot of the analysts now are actually coming out, or are actually physicians and people with medical backgrounds to do analysis of pharmaceutical companies and so on, because they can actually talk to the researchers and stuff like that. So it's another area, but to me, it's not a most it's not an area that's very easy to get into, right? I've dealt with a lot of these characters, and they're really smart, but they have huge differences in backgrounds, and some of them, like, I don't know how they got there, right? But they must have known somebody, right? So there's a little bit of that going on. So how do we get in? It's not easy. You're going to make yourself more appealing. Advanced or specialized degrees, that helps. Internship experience, that helps, and you don't get that from going to be a biology major, so I have to give you some ideas there. Proven communication and leadership skills, well, you can do that kind of stuff. You're supposed to be building up your resume while you're in a pre-med student, so maybe you did some research projects, maybe you did some things where you communicated, maybe you were on the school paper or something like that. That's all communications. And leadership, maybe you were the president of something, and you showed leadership, and so some of these things you actually should have anyways, because if you were pre-med students, you were supposed to be accumulating this kind of expertise or this kind of background to get into med school. They don't base it just on you got straight A's in all your courses. They want you to have other activities involved, be in other activities. They don't want you to be a nerd, right? If somebody just went to the library and studied all the time, right? So some of the entry points, as I mentioned, there are research associates. You can have a bachelor's and you'll be a technologist, technician type person, and you may have to learn some new stuff, but that is a way into the company. You could do sales. You could do, we didn't mention this, but marketing research, which is basically analyzing data about the market, about sales, about commercial kinds of things. You could be a product manager, all right, a product manager, a project manager. There's some entry aspects of that. The rest of these, you can see they're pretty much higher level degrees, so you're not likely to get in directly. The competitive intelligence area might be able to do something there. And I said before, quality assurance and so on. Tech ops is another one. So these are entry points. And again, I emphasize entry is the key. You want to get into the company. Once you're in the company, you can try to improve whatever job you're doing into a something more interesting or better job, all right? But you can't do that if you're on the outside. You're better off on the inside. So the key is to get in there first and then worry about exactly what you're going to do, all right? Contact points, obviously, they always say networking and internships. We'll mention that in a second. Scientific meetings, recruiters. These companies, I don't say they're lazy, but they actually use recruiters. The HR department coordinates recruiters. They find people, they get their resumes, they send them in, and they find new employees. So you want to get into a company, you want to find recruiters. If you publish something, you do something in the public domain, they'll find you. The recruiters will find you because they're always looking for people who they can promote into companies. And if they promote somebody and they get hired, they get paid, all right? So the recruiters are interested in anybody they can get potentially into a company. Then LinkedIn as one of the social media kinds of things. LinkedIn is probably the best one for pharmaceutical industry. Most of the rest of the stuff, no one pays any attention to. So here's an option at FAU. When employers want you to have 10 years of work experience before you're age 23, which is what most of you are. It's called the Professional Science Master's Program, or it's in business biotechnology. The core curriculum is 10 credits. It involves biotech business development, this ENT 6188 course. This is a graduate school, and this course is the one I teach. I teach this one every fall in the evening, and I get biotechnology students, I get bioengineering students, I get occasional business student, right? And we talk about, we have a good time, right? There's also venture creation, another business course that's offered. Then there's two credit internships, and these internships we'll come to in a second. The science side, you need 15 credits, and business, you need 9 credits. And then the two internships are 4 credits, one in science, the second one involves working on business and administrative side of a company or an institute. Tech transfer is an example. You could do that at the university. This is like licensing kind of stuff, business development. So this is the same thing I talked about before. And obviously you could do some science things with a research scientist at FAU or Scripps or someplace, or even a company, right? I mean, depending on Dr. Binninger and his connections to make that happen. So, future employment areas, just things are pretty fluid, but here's one chart shows you biological science teachers post-secondary, percent change, 16%, biomedical engineering, 23%, and medical clinical laboratory technologists. This is a shortage right now. They're like 14%. These are the people that are being used to do all the COVID-19 testing, all right? And they sort of ran out of people. It's been a big problem. Some schools have actually hammered on a new program to try to cover some of the shortfall in the number of students. Some of you, Indian River is an example of a school, UCF, USF, have programs for lab techs. So you might investigate that. With a bachelor's degree, all you have to do is take the clinical stuff and the exam in your med tech. So that's something to think about. So I also want you to think about this. So Abraham Lincoln is a portrait of an achiever, right? You need to be an achiever. So these are all the things that happened to him. Mother died, sister died, failed in business, defeated in Illinois, fiance died, nervous breakdown, defeated for Congress, father died, defeated for Senate, defeated for vice president, defeated for US Senate, and then elected for president of the United States. And the rest is history. You cannot fail unless you quit, right? So you've come this far, it's not time to quit. You need to go on and use what you've learned and make the best of your degree. If you don't get into medical school, then don't become a taxi cab driver. You know, don't throw away your education, use it, right? And what I've told you today is some examples of where you can use it in a company. I do admit that most of the stuff that I said was not in the state of Florida. You pretty much have to leave the state for a lot of these kinds of positions because we don't have big pharmaceutical companies here. But I did show you what you could do if you work for a CRO or somebody like that. You could be doing research that would normally be done in the company. Like you can see the background where I'm sitting here. That building in the background is where one of the places I used to work, and that's up in New Jersey, right? And so you want to move to New Jersey, you know, they got their restaurants are closed, you know, all kinds of problems. Florida is the best place to be right now, but on the other hand, at some point you may have to make that decision. You may have to move to New Jersey or California or Illinois or someplace up north and put up with a little bit of snow and stuff. All right. You can always, you know, make all your money and stuff and be happy and then retire to Florida sometime in the future. But in Florida, it's kind of difficult to find some of these kinds of positions. Okay. So I think yeah. So if you have a job, you know, if you're working at, let's say, a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company or something, so you're happy about that. And of course, if you do, then you're making big bucks, right? And there is an advantage to working at big pharmaceutical companies. They do pay quite well, all right? And they will take care of education. People who are short on something in education, there's a reason why the College of New Jersey is a huge school for people with pharmaceutical degrees, because it's right in the middle of all the pharmaceutical companies, and the faculty are all from pharmaceutical companies and so on. And it's free. It's not free to go there, but it's free because the companies that you're working for pay your tuition. So this is one of the benefits of working for these big companies. They will advance your degree, especially if it has something to do with what you're working in, you know, what kind of position and so on. Okay. So I think that's all I have. Yep, that's it. So if you have questions, put them in the questions and answer section, and I might be able to see them.
Okay.
There's Dr. Binninger. He's in San Francisco today.
Yeah, just checking out the pharmaceutical base here. No, wishful thinking, one of my favorite cities. Okay, so if you have, thank you. Interesting seminar. I think it may give a few students some new ideas. If you're in the audience and you have a question, please type it into the Q&A. One little side comment, one of your last comments about the company paying for your education, that sounds very much like the advice I got from my first graduate advisor, that you don't pay for your graduate education, you let someone else pay for it. You did ask about other students outside of biology, so I got sort of a random.
Yeah, I see most of them say they were biology majors.
Most, you know, one couple of health science majors. One person was pre-med, but now they want to get a PhD in chemistry. A lot of our neuroscience majors, but nobody outside of science really.
Yeah,
Uh,
the reason I asked that question is because I was just wondering, there's got to be a group of students out there that don't take this seminar that actually are in the same boat. They haven't done well or something on the MCAT exam. Not all the students in the seminar are that way, but they haven't done well, and now they're looking for a new career and so on. And we're actually not addressing them. They don't get to hear my words of wisdom.
yeah, maybe we need to throw a wider net.
Yeah.
But one question I did get, okay, for someone wanting to get into biomedical research, is a PhD a necessity? I think you addressed that question, but you could be a little more specific.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So biomedical research, I know a PhD is supposed to be the top degree in all universities, right? But the problem is in the medical field, the MD is the top degree, and so you can be if you're working in the medical field, it's almost 100%. A medical doctor is going to be in charge, and some of them actually have PhDs also. So if you want to do that, you can, if you're not going to go to medical school, you become a PhD. Don't think, and under most cases, that you're going to be the big cheese. It's still going to be some physician, but that shouldn't stop you. I mean, if obviously you're worthy of your research because you had a PhD. It's just difficult. Pharmaceutical companies hire lots and lots of PhDs, but they hire lots and lots of masters and bachelors also. So it's you don't. They hire some MDs. They don't have to be in that field. So the answer is you can go that route. I suggest that if you do that, you want to get to a place at least for your last degree, the PhD degree, whatever that might be, that is, if you want to do biomedical, that really is into biomedical science, so that you have a good connection between your advisor and the companies and whatnot, where you might want to go. I just noticed it's just across the street. I don't know if the building is up there, but I noticed that FAU has a new building, or it's in the works, the neuroscience building up here in Jupiter. Is that in the planning stage?
Not
You know?
sure. I haven't been on the Jupiter campus for more than a year.
Right. Well, if that's the case, see, there is one thing about FAU. They are really going crazy on this neuroscience, and it really is an important area, obviously. And the fact that it's here with Scripps and Max Planck is an amazing combination of things. It's difficult for FAU in general because they're in Boca, and Scripps and Max Planck are up here in Jupiter. But if you put one of the specialties like neuroscience up here with them, that group is going to go a long ways into making this into a very important area up here in Jupiter.
Jenny just confirmed that, yeah, there's a new neuroscience building going up in Jupiter.
Up. Okay. Yeah.
I think that whole area eventually looks like it has the potential of being another Research Triangle Park.
Right.
With Scripps and Max Planck up there. Okay, we got several more questions. One, I think, would just be to expand on your comment about getting experience. In other words, you need 10 years experience before you're 23 years old. So the question is, how do you get the experience if nobody will give you an opportunity to get the experience? That sort of circular argument.
Well, that's, again, like I said, if you can get in at a lower level, don't have the idea that you're going to be the top cheese and the top person in whatever job you take, that you're going to have to start at the bottom, because especially in pharmaceutical companies, there's so many people with higher degrees. So if you don't have a higher degree, you're going to start at a lower level. But again, once you're in the company, you have more opportunity to move forward with either getting more degrees, more training, or just having different jobs that have different expertise and so on.
Okay. as I usually get the request, the question is whether or not, and Jenny may confirm, did we record this? And we'll be able
Yeah,
to make that. I think so.
I
I
see
think
the little
we,
button up here, recording, it says recording.
okay. So the question was it, so it has been recorded, and very shortly I'll be able to post the link on Canvas so you can download it. You got some very complimentary comments here, not questions, but love the seminar, very useful.
Send money, send money.
Let's see. I want to go into the field of pharmacy at Nova. I have not yet taken the PCAT. I read it's not required but recommended. At this point in time, I don't know if it'll be able to do it in time. Do you think my chances are low to get accepted?
No, I think your chances are high, unless you're a real putz, as far as grades and so on. I mean, they don't take everybody, but they take reasonable grades, and students. The pharmacy schools, they have their facilities need to be filled in order to be efficiently operated. And the problem is that the pharmacy schools overbuilt, and so we have a few extra more than we need in Florida. So Nova is not one of those overbuilt places. It's just that the competition for those kind of positions. And we've had, I'll give you an example. In the past, it's not unusual for Palm Beach State up here in Palm Beach Gardens to actually send over 5 to 10 students to go into the pharmacy program at Palm Beach Gardens, because that's one of the sites up here. The other one's down in Davie, and but that's in the past. We aren't sending as many over there because it's not that they aren't taking them, and it's not that they are full. It's just that the marketplace for pharmacists has actually gone down a little bit, and so it's a little overcrowded with them. But I guarantee you they can use every single one of them right now at Walmart, Publix, and CVS to do injections, because they're hiring them back. They get them, people who've retired, they're dragging them back in to give injections for the viruses. That's a temporary thing, but so I don't think you have a problem getting into a pharmacy school unless you haven't done well in your science courses, like anything.
Okay. Good. Next question. So what career would be the easiest to get into with just a bachelor's degree?
Well, with a bachelor's degree, any of those things I mentioned earlier, you could get in. Again, you've got to have, if you were a pre-med student, you should have had done other things, and so your resume, so to speak, will look good. And once you go for an interview, and almost every single time there will be interviews, you want to express all those kinds of things that you did, not only just the science, but everything that you do, because you may be looking at one position, and they may have several positions open, and they look at you and say, this person is applying for this job, but you know what? I think I'll offer them this other job, which they actually may be more qualified for. And it may not be in biology, but it may be in something that it has to do with their personality or the way they handle themselves, and their organization skills, and so on. And you may find a completely different position than what you were actually applying for, and maybe even be a happier person. So it's kind of hard to say what you should major in, because again, we've already established that most of you are biology majors. We didn't find too many non-biology. I did notice a psychology major in there, and which is one of the most popular degrees in the university. They don't necessarily know what they're going to do with that degree. I'll give you a hint. You can go into advertising. There's a lot of psychologists in advertising. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to psych you out, right? And so they do hire lots of psychologists. It's amazing, not to be the creative side, but to actually do the testing and analysis of the products and stuff. It's kind of interesting. So there's no one fast and hard rule. Obviously, if you're going into the research side, you probably should have a biology or chemistry degree, but other than that, you're pretty wide open.
Okay. Hope you still got some energy. I got a list of questions. Keep going here.
Yeah, sure. I see.
Do you have any insight into how with international biology students finding these type of jobs?
I think it really makes much difference. The pharmaceutical companies are actually well attuned to international because they're the big guys are global, and so it's not unusual to hire people in from other countries, even if they didn't go to school here. I mean, I think you're asking if somebody went to school here. The only problem with an expat, with somebody from another country, if they're not a citizen of the United States, then there's always issues about payments and stuff. If we send somebody from the U.S. to Europe, let's say, you have to pay all kinds of extra money for them to go there. So there may be some financial issues, but that doesn't. I haven't seen that as being a big problem in let's say foreign students being hired in pharmaceutical companies. There is a shortage. There's always a shortage of educated people in certain areas, or they don't want to go to certain places. And so other non-U.S. students who actually went to school here say, I don't mind living in Detroit, so I'm going to go to Detroit. If that were the case, not that Detroit's bad, but just
How about one student says they plan to get a minor in history. Will that help?
So here's the deal. So as I always tell my younger students, right, my freshman, sophomore students who are pre-med students, I say, you can major in anything to be a pre-med student if you take the courses that are required for med school: the biology 1 and 2, chemistry 1 and 2, organic 1 and 2, calculus, psychology, biochemistry, all those things. You take those courses. You can major in music if you want. You can major in English, math. I have had students do that, and I have known hundreds of physicians that have not majored in biology. So what's the advantage? The advantage is most doctors are not scientists. They're artists. And guess what? They like artistic things. They like to be able to discuss. Lots of them are in a band, in the choir, in all kinds of different things that are artistic, and the historical society, and you name it, they're in all kinds of other activities. So guess what? You have a history major or even a minor, you go to your interview with the physician and they say, well, what else do you know besides science? What can you talk to me about? And you start talking about history with them. They will be impressed. They like to be able to talk about other things other than science. Otherwise, you're just another science person who got straight A's. I want to know what your interests are, what's interesting about you. That's what I think some of the 9 or 10% of the people who don't get into med school don't have. They go to the interview and they have nothing else to say. What did you do? I studied. So what did you do on the weekend? You're at UF and there was football, or FAU, sorry. There was a football at FAU. Did you go to the game? No, I studied. Well, did you go to church on Sunday morning? No, I studied. That's really boring, all right? The doctor's going to this guy's not going to med school, all right? But somebody comes in and start talking about, the music or some other topic, that they can relate to. Hey, I like this guy. They got personality, they got something interesting to say. Because that's what doctors are. They tend to be interesting and artistically oriented, not science oriented, despite the fact they take a bunch of science. In fact, maybe you know this, but it's not a secret to me anyways. Some of the worst students in labs are pre-med students. You don't want them in labs, right?
Yeah, we can have that private conversation.
Just kidding, just kidding.
All right, here's a specific case. So this person has says he or she been employed in the pharmaceutical. She's already employed in the pharmaceuticals, but has a friend who wanted to go to med school. She's been unemployed for the past few years, been studying on the MCAT. She's having difficulty finding a job in her area without being bilingual. What would you recommend for her?
Well, I mean, usually it sounds like somebody that can't get out of where she's living. That's the problem. Which, if it's the bilingual problem, it's probably down in Miami, right? Which is a lot of times that's a problem for students down there. If you try to go to places or live down there, you better be able to speak Spanish. And if you can't, you're up the creek. And even some of the jobs, that's tough. So obviously the first thing is the move, but usually that's not an option. You can't move. There's some other reason you have to stay where you are. That's a toughie. You sort of have to take a job to live. Maybe remember the job I mentioned about writing and stuff. Maybe that's something you could do. You don't have to move, and it's something you can do from home. You can make some connection with medical education agencies or advertising agencies or something along that line. You might actually find something you can do where you live, as opposed to having to move away from the bilingual part. Right? That's a tough thing to answer.
Okay. How about, what would you say for students who did not do well on an MCAT, or it looks like, or don't have an outstanding GPA? Should they try for DO, the osteopathic route, instead of jumping to pharmaceutical degrees or research?
It sort of depends. So the DOs, in Florida, for instance, there's no shortage of DOs, and that and what they're doing is they're doing just a fine job. If you end up being a patient who requires a certain level of specialty, then you get sent to the specialty. So DOs are like general practitioners, right, without going to medical school. And I have found DOs are fairly knowledgeable. In fact, one of my physicians is a DO, and they do what they do. But then if things get more complicated, and I don't have those, then I would have to go to somebody with more expertise, and that's likely to be an MD. So that DO is one thing, but again, you remember, doctors, physicians, DOs, whatever, you're dealing with people. And if you're in the lab and research and stuff and so on, you don't have to deal with as many people, and certainly not with patients. And patients tend not to be the most pleasant people when they're sick. I mean, think about when you're sick, you feel like, being nice and so on. And so it turns out, if you're a DO, MD, nurse, whatever, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, all those people have to deal with some of the most obnoxious people because of their illnesses and so on. And if you want to do that, then pick anything that fits along that line. If you want to stay away from the people, and some of their, you can work on their problems, but just not with them, then go to the lab, work on the lab, work in the pharmaceutical company and so on. Rarely did I ever see a patient when I worked in a pharmaceutical company or even diagnostic company. Yeah, okay.
All right. Let's see. I'll try to go quickly. I got a few left, and we're going to run out of time actually, probably
Okay.
almost out of time. How do you obtain clinical experience without a social security number if you're an international student? Because they're trying to get medical experience, but they, so you can see the problem is just because of being an international status.
Yeah, I have no knowledge of that. Again, I would expect that this would be handled by your pre-health department there, what's it called? The health science group, you know, which is the equivalent of the pre-med, because they're the ones that arrange all the shadowing and all that stuff. I mean, they must have to answer those kinds of questions. They must have ways to do that. Otherwise, you know, all the international students might as well pack up and go away because you're not going to be able to do it. So there must be a way to do it, but they would be the people I would ask.
Okay.
You know, that pre-health department, I don't know where they are.
I know we're running out of time. Do you have a few more minutes, Tom?
Yeah.
Since we're recording, I know some students will have to leave, but we are recording, and some of these questions may be important to them.
Okay.
So this one, I want to go to dental school. What tips are the tips you gave for med students the same you'd give to someone wanting to pursue dentistry?
Yeah, but again, with the dental school, you have to look at the the actual requirements. I spend more time on the pre-med side, and I know exactly what they need. But I think in the dental side, you actually might need anatomy and physiology or some other courses that the pre-med students don't need. They actually don't need anatomy and physiology. That's not one of the requirements for getting into med school. All right. I mean, a lot of students take it, and a lot of schools require it, but it's not a prerequisite. Dental school, on the other hand, they might actually require A&P. I don't know. I mean, I've had students go to dental school. You know, they take pretty much the same thing. They may not need to take organic either. You have to look at your dental. Like it's called the DCAT, right? It's the whatever the dental exam is.
That's the
That would be
MCAT.
yeah. I would look at that, and you know, the MCAT one has a huge database of information. So I suspect the dental one does too. That's what I would look for first. Just search online.
Okay. This is a question. You may have more of the details on this because I don't. So you mentioned about the medical laboratory technologist jobs becoming more abundant. Are there programs available for certification, or is it a combination of courses and experience that the employers are looking for?
Yeah, you're at two levels. There's a technician and a technologist level. You guys are all beyond the technician level because you're already on. You're pretty much close to your bachelor's degree. The medical technologist or clinical laboratory scientist is a 4-year degree, and it's offered in programs at UCF and I believe USF. And India, I just learned the other day, Indian River has sort of a configured course there. And I don't know how you would fit into that because they run it into their bachelor's of biology degree. So I would stay away from that one a little bit. But the UCF and USF, look at their programs. I think with all you would need to do with a bachelor's degree is to take their clinical rotations, which they sponsor. And you might even be able to do that if they can work an agreement. Let's say you lived in West Palm Beach, you might be able to go to Good Samaritan Hospital and, you know, have some sort of a training there and get get the certificate or whatever from a combination of UCF and, you know, whatever, you know. So you'd have to talk to them, those programs, about it. There's obviously programs out of state, but if you're in, those are the two I know in state. I'm sure there's some technician programs. They're called MLTs. Some of the, maybe even Nova might have one of those. You can do that too, but you're obviously, you're not getting paid a lot when you're in the lab and in the medical clinical lab. And if you're in a technician level, you're going to get paid even less. You might want, because you have a bachelor's degree, you might want to go that way, or you will have a bachelor's degree. So that's what I would do. I would check with, especially you. Okay.
Are you having a technical problem?
No, I just had to, I had my one ran out, so I put the
Oh,
other one in.
oh, yeah, been there, done that. Okay. This will be a little bit of a insight for recommendation letters. So this person, the student has not built up a strong relationship with many teachers. I went to class, did well. Not sure if they remember me at this point. What process should I expect when asking a teacher for a letter of recommendation if they don't really know me that well? I have a resume with work experience mainly, but that's about it. And I feel I don't know what information to give them to make me stand out. So, I mean, this is a common problem I run into too with, the large genetics class. And
Yeah,
oftentimes a couple of years after the student's taken the course.
yeah. I mean, you have to appreciate the fact that we have all these students. The student has to appreciate that, you don't. The student have to appreciate that we have all you students. And if you don't do anything that helps to make you stand out, then it's very difficult to make up, something good to say about you. And I even cut it off. If you don't get an A or a B in my course, I'm not writing your recommendation. I can't, in good faith, say something great about you if you got a C in the course, right? In theory, a C is like your average person. And if you're going to med school, you can't be an average person, right? So you better be getting an A or a B. If you got an A or a B, I'm likely to have something that you did in class that I can refer to, and then I can build on that and say some good things. And then beyond that, I always ask for a resume and I sort of sometimes have to make up a little bit of a story that, implying I know what you did on the outside, but I mean, otherwise it becomes a very short letter, right? So, and somebody takes me for one course and it's only for lecture and it's not even a lab or something. Like they're a person in the lecture. I only think they took exams. I mean, fine, they got good grades. I mean, what else can I say? So you better have a resume that has stuff on it too that I can sort of refer to and say, hey, this is pretty good.
Yeah, that's
That's what I can do. I don't know what it's difficult.
yeah, I usually at the beginning of the genetics course, I show them one of those forms that you've seen them now so many times of doing online recommendations. And they want you to evaluate things like ability to work well with others,
Oh,
critical thinking,
right.
writing skills, all of those, which unless you come and work in my lab or you're in my smaller biotech lab, I end up
Yep.
just honestly having to say, cannot comment. And so
Yep.
that's why I push students to really, it's to their advantage to either get to know one of the professors in a smaller class, get in their lab somehow so that they can say something in the letter that isn't just obvious from looking at a transcript and going, yeah, this is a really good
Right.
student. Okay.
Yep.
Here's one. Let's see. I'm a senior graduating this summer and I plan to
I
attend.
got it. Yeah, the
Oh, you see
PA
it?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see. What you recommend? So, fulfill patient hours required. Would you recommend I do med tech? So again, I need maybe I need to talk to that group down there. But you have the health, what is it called? Pre-health group. Where the pre-med students
There's
go
a
in.
pre-health professional group.
Yeah, health sciences or something like that. Yeah. If you're a PA student, would they or do you, as Catherine, do you actually get to use that service, the pre-health? If you do, I would just go and talk to them. The second thing is if you're going to PA school, and I'll make a plug here, make sure you're going to a reputable PA school, because that's another thing that's happened. PA schools they pop up all over the place, and some of them are not certified, some of them are not very good, and so you really want to go to a good one, because doctors are not going to hire PAs who are going to be their person in their office, representing the physician. If it's a poor person, or somebody who is not a well-educated person or didn't come from a certified program, it's very risky on their part, and their insurance rates will probably go up, and they aren't going to like that. So make sure you get it into a good school. And then third, look at the schools, because the schools are going to tell you the kinds of things you should do. If they tell you that you ought to have some health background, then look at what they suggest. If they don't suggest med tech, the lab stuff, and you want to do that, then send them a note and ask them, would med tech be an example of something we could use as our medical experience? All right. I mean, that's what I would do. You guys gonna have to start talking to these schools about what you want to do. It's your future, and if you don't ask about your future, you won't know until you get there, and that may be too late. So you got to start the communication. I tell the students here at Palm Beach State, if you want to go to FAU, you want to go to these other schools, you have to start talking to them and finding out what's going on, even if it's joining a Facebook group or something like that, where it's from the school, from the pre-med students or something. So what's being said, what's going on, and not just which professor should I take, because that's another thing that goes on. Ooh, don't take him, he's too hard. Don't be doing that. Don't use it for that. Use it for information about what you should be doing. All right. So I would ask from the PA schools themselves also what they actually want you to take. If they don't spell it out, I would suggest maybe that's not the school you want to go to, right? Maybe they don't need you, they don't want you. Yeah, they aren't that not that encouraging.
Okay. One final comment was, we've had several requests for access to the recording, but I said, so if you're in Canvas, if you're in the class, I will post that link on Canvas. There are a few students attending who are not in Canvas. So if you have a friend who's in the course, they can give you the link. Otherwise, feel free to send me an email and I will just send you the link for the recording. Okay, so I want to thank you again. And based on the number of questions we had, I think the seminar was very well received. We are running over time and we still have 93 students logged in. So I always take those.
We have to stop doing this in person. I mean, you got more questions this way than we ever got in person.
Oh, actually, that's true. Okay, well, thank you again.
All right.
And stay safe out there.
All righty, you too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.